Greetings, lovers of lore. Thank you for joining me for the final installment of the Streets of New Capenna story as it unfolds. And we do have an epic conclusion today. So enjoy the sights of New Capenna on the screen while we wrap up this story. The last part of the story starts off with Elspeth, Giada, and Vivian. They have obviously fled. Vivian is scouting out for a safe location for them to stay. While she's off doing that, Elspeth and Giada have a talk. Giada is terrified and tired. She genuinely wants to help the people of New Capenna, but she doesn't believe that her efforts will ever be enough. No matter how much halo she can generate, will it actually fix the world of Capenna? And Elspeth basically confirms that Capenna is broken and a handful more halo is not going to fix that situation, right? So basically, Elspeth looking at Giada feels a resonance with her. Giada kind of triggers Elspeth's view of herself in an earlier age. So Vivian promises that she will keep Giada safe until everything is sorted out. Vivian returns having found a suitable location for them, and they all end up sleeping in an abandoned warehouse that seems like a good location. It is proven to not be the greatest location the next morning when both Vivian and Elspeth are awake talking, Giada sleeping, and all of a sudden, multiple doors to the warehouse they're in burst open, smashing glass everywhere, as the Cabretti have found them. 5 goons with axes and swords, headed up by Ginny, make their way into the warehouse. And Ginny is livid, basically just obviously freaking out about what happened. They were prepared for this situation. Obviously, Vivian and Elspeth are caught off guard. Vivian goes to pull her bow out right away, but Ginny's too quick and whips a dagger across the warehouse, slamming into Vivian's arm, basically distracting her long enough for one of the Cabretti goons to get up to Vivian, knock the bow out of her hand, and take it away so Vivian no longer can summon up those spirit beasts, and basically is like, hey, what you gonna do now? We took your power away from you. And at this point, Ginny walks up and sticks her knife directly under Elspeth's chin. And Elspeth's mind is racing. How did they find us? At this point, Giada has woken up and hears basically Ginny saying, why are you helping out the adversary here? What are you doing? And Elspeth says, I'm not helping the adversary. I'm not working for him. I'm helping Giada. I'm saving her. Ginny, at this point, her eyes bulge. She's not having it. Lies! She spits back at Elspeth, right? And this is when Giada basically kind of pipes up, and not too soon either, because Elspeth was feeling Ginny's knife start to slide into her neck just the tiniest bit. But Giada's words cooled things down. She basically said, isn't Jetmir head of the Cabretti family? Isn't he the one with the power to decide what happens to traitors? Are you taking that power into your own hands now? And so at that point, it causes Ginny to have some doubt, and her face ends up clouded. She thinks about it. And at that time, while that's happening, Giada continues onward and says, thank you. Thank you for saving me. And makes it appear like she didn't run off with Elspeth and Vivian and is actually being saved. So that at that point, the Cabretti goons surround all of them and they place magical shackles upon them. At that point, they're heading off to a obscura hideout, because you have to remember that while all of this is happening, all of the adversary's minions are spread across New Capenna, causing havoc and looking for the Font, who is Giada, right? So they have to be careful with where they're going. The idea is they're going to go to the obscura hideout, but it could be a trap. Now, basically, Elspeth was surprised to note that Ginny used the exact same knock that Xander had taught her when she was making deliveries for him. And she leaned into Vivian. Be wary. So at this point, we see a character from a previous installment of the story, that is Kamiz the Cephalid. So Kamiz greets them and basically leads them through this sort of fortune teller shop into a back secret area, letting them know that Jetmir is stable. Now, when they get to Jetmir, he is in incredibly bad shape. He's stable, but his life force is running out. He is not going to survive, right? And at this point, Ginny is freaking out. So she turns to Giada, pulls an empty jar out of her bag. Giada fills that with Halo, and before she can actually hand it back to Ginny to heal Jetmir with, all of a sudden, there's all this slamming and commotion, and through the secret door pile a dozen agents. And at first, Ginny thinks it's just the Riveteers coming in to cause havoc, because this is the sort of thing they do. But it turns out it's actually a squad of the Maestros and the Riveteers who are servants of the adversary. So they basically show up. Vivian at this point uses the opportunity to the distracted nature of the people who are guarding her. She punches the dude who has her bow, manages to snag her bow back, right? At the same time, Elspeth uses her magic to get rid of the shackles. Vivian's like, hey, I didn't even know you had these tricks. What were you waiting for? And Elspeth says, I was just trying to keep everything under wraps until the right moment. And I mean, from my perspective, I think Elspeth probably should have used her powers a little bit earlier. You know what I mean? Maybe when Ginny had the dagger inside her neck, perhaps, but whatever. A quirk of the story, right? So Elspeth got rid of these shackles. Then they have this big fight in a tight space. There's way too many people in this confined area, right? So Elspeth's sword is giant and clunky for her. She prefers a blade that's a little bit smaller. She can't really wield it the way she wants to in this enclosed space. Everybody is having some kind of problem. But regardless of this, Elspeth ends up getting mangled. One of the Riveteers crushes in her rib cage with a hammer, and another one, basically a Maestro, jams one of his daggers right up into her shoulder. So Elspeth is in a very, very bad spot right now. Basically, she collapses to the ground. Her vision is fading, right? And then all of a sudden, she feels warmth and peace flowing through her and power. She feels comfortable. And she opens her eyes and she can see Giada's there. And Giada has something in her hands, right? She's pouring something into her mouth. It's the bottle of Halo that was made for Jetmir. Right now it's being used to cure Elspeth. But something else is going on. As Elspeth's body is reknitting itself and rebuilding itself, she can see there's something going on with Giada. There's some kind of haze around her. And the more she stares at it, the more it resolves itself into a golden glow. And Elspeth can't help but murmur about it. She looks up at Giada, looking beautiful and radiant, and says, "You glow." And Giada was surprised by this. She said, "Wait, you can see it too?" So Giada already knows about this, right? Now at this point, Camille and Ginny come and collect up Giada. Elspeth and Vivian go to tag along as they're trying to get out of this area. And at first, Ginny isn't having it. But basically they point out, hey, you guys are in a tough spot. You can use any help that you can, right? So Ginny accepts, allows them to come along. And Camille leads them to a secret Obscura pathway, where the ultimate destination is to reach the Cloud Spire, which is basically the Obscura's headquarters, right? So, basically on the way through this pathway, Giada starts to look around furtively, right? And Elspeth notices this. And when she thinks nobody is looking, Giada slips the bracelet off and just kind of like lets it fall to the ground behind her. And as she walks away, Elspeth is looking at her questioningly, and she basically mouths the words, "It's a magical item used to track me." So that is how they were able to track them down to that warehouse. Now that tracking magic has been basically disengaged. Elspeth at this point renews her inner vows to do anything she can to protect and save Giada. As they head down towards the Obscura situation, they end up in a very bad spot because it turns out that it's actually a trap by the Obscura. So the Obscura troops surround the group. Now Camille gets basically gutted by Ginny on the spot. Just dagger in the guts, and Camille is trying to crawl away slowly while the Obscura are kind of like basically making it so these guys can't escape, right? And during this, basically, Giada and Elspeth are able to Giada, Elspeth, and Vivian are able to make their way out in this commotion. They leave Ginny behind, but they're able to escape, right? As they're running away, Elspeth noticed that the glow that's surrounding Giada isn't just coming from Giada. There's actually a glow coming from the city of New Capenna itself. It's actually coming from the angel statues. Every single one of the angel statues has this glowing aura around it. And at the same time, she can see a faint aura of the same nature around her own hands. And at the same time, she can hear this angel song. It's almost like a low susurrus at first, but as she tunes into it, she can actually start to feel it. It's a song of both pain and peace. And she is awed by this. Obviously, there's some connection between Giada, the statues, and her. But unfortunately, there's no more time to think about it, as a gravelly voice comes from behind, and it turns out it's Ob Nixilis. No escape. So Vivian basically goes, all right, pulls out her bow and fires off a ghost arrow that turns into a wolf. But Ob Nixilis is like, please, honey. And he punches the wolf in the face and it explodes into nothingness, which is absolutely amazing. Vivian at that point says to Elspeth, you handle him, I'll handle everything else. And she takes off. As she's going to take off, Ob Nixilis is calling after her, taunting her. Have fun playing with my minions. When I'm done with your friend and the girl, I'm coming for you. So epic, right? So Elspeth engages in this battle with Ob Nixilis, but things are going very, very poorly for her. She cannot seem to land a single blow. As previously mentioned, the blade that she is using is clunky and unwieldy to her. So as a result, she really can't strike Ob Nixilis at all. Every time she tries, she's not getting anywhere. And Ob Nixilis is just having his day of it, right? He's chuckling, making fun of her, taunting her. I mean, he's a demon, right? Playing with your food is what they like to do. So Elspeth is becoming more and more desperate, right? And at a certain point, she starts begging Giada, run, I'm not going to be able to beat him. Giada, run. And Giada's like, I can't run. Elspeth's like, she basically begging her, run, please run, over and over. But Giada refuses, right? And so Elspeth keeps fighting basically over and over, trying to take down Nixilis. And while this is happening, Giada is actually glowing brighter and brighter and brighter, right? And after a little while, Elspeth starts to notice how luminous she is. Even Ob Nixilis stops and is like, wait, what are you doing? Stop that, sort of thing, right? Giada whispers at this point. As the light reaches the highest level of intensity, this little whisper comes from her saying, I'm ready. And at that moment, with those words, the light blasted out in every direction, basically like midday light at the middle of the night style scenario, right? An insane amount of light bursts forward out of Giada. She actually, at this point, is converting into halo essence. So she turns into this gigantic angelic avatar made out of pure halo essence. And this waves out across the city. It slams into Ob Nixilis and throws him like a child would throw a toy. But with Elspeth, it just washes over her in gentle, peaceful waves, filling her with joy and strength and resolve, right? So the tables are turning now, right? She now has this power flowing through her. There's joy all around Elspeth because the angel song from all of the statues has risen in this moment, right? So you've got this light flaring from this pure being of halo. Every angel statue is singing a song of joy and defiance and strength at the top of its lungs, all resonating together at the same moment. And then, basically, you have a situation where Elspeth looks, Ob Nixilis is laying on the ground. All his goons have been stunned and knocked unconscious. Ob Nixilis is the only problem left here. And in her mind, Giada's voice appears, saying to Elspeth, "End it. Save New Capenna. You have what you need." And Elspeth looks down, and the clunky blade that she was holding has been transformed. Now it is a much sleeker blade with a gigantic pommel orb, and that pommel orb is sloshing with a liquid, a white liquid. It's pure halo, and that halo flows out of the pommel up into the blade, making it glow with extreme power. And at this point, Ob Nixilis has gotten to his feet, but the confidence isn't quite the same in his eyes. He still thinks he's going to win, right? But Elspeth flows forwards with this blade at the same time that Giada is fading from existence. So Ob Nixilis is dealing with the loss of the font. The font is just gone, right? And now you have Elspeth charging down on him with this new aura-infused, or I should say halo-infused blade, right? And he basically, Ob Nixilis ends up on the back foot. Now he is the one backpedaling. He is the one on the defensive. And at a certain point, Elspeth actually manages to drive her blade up against the side of Ob Nixilis' neck, giving him a nice little gash on the side of his neck. And Elspeth's like basically winding up to try and do a full-on take his head off maneuver when Ob Nixilis says, "You know what, this ain't worth it." And he just, boom, disappears immediately from the plane. He just planeswalks away like that, which is something any planeswalker can do when there is a genuine threat to them. So it's good that it's mentioned in the story here that he wanders off this quickly. That's one of those things that sometimes can be a sticking point for me. But overall, Ob Nixilis says, "Peace, I'm out of here," and he jams off out, right? So at this point, now New Capenna has essentially been cleansed of the adversary. It's still going to be suffering under the leadership of the different crime families, but that isn't really going to be our problem as people following the story, right? Because we're going to be moving on from New Capenna. So the story continues with the aftermath, right? We basically have Elspeth and Vivian heading over to the Maestro's museum together because Elspeth is determined to look over all of Xander's ancient secret histories that she was promised to get access to, right? So when she arrives at the Maestro's, Angelo is now the leader of the Maestros. We all knew this was going to happen, right? What had happened after he left the building that night was Xander had stitched a letter for him into his coat. So when Angelo found the letter, it told him basically what happened. "I'm dead. You're in charge of the Maestros now. Elspeth will be returning for information from the archives. Do not restrict her, and also try to learn as little as you can about what's going on. We don't want to be involved in any of this stuff," right? So basically, Angelo explains that to Elspeth. Elspeth and Vivian are given access to the ancient histories, and by digging through it all, they were able to uncover what actually happened on New Capenna. So they had the city of New Capenna. There was a Phyrexian attempt on the city. The angels were unable to stop the Phyrexian threat. So what they did was they joined up with the demon lords. But unfortunately, the demon lords actually betrayed the angels and put them into a form of magical stasis. By putting them into the form of this magical stasis, that's how they were able to extract the halo from the angels, essentially converting their life essence into halo magic, which is pretty dark, but ultimately it did win, right? The demon lords did use the halo to beat the Phyrexians, and then the demon lords departed from New Capenna, never to be seen again. So inside this hidden history museum, they find a big stash of halo that Xander had set aside. They confiscate it. They're going to take it back, go and talk to a Johnny. Ultimately, Elspeth realizes that they're going to need to stop Elish Norn, the biggest threat from Phyrexia, the leader of New Phyrexia, right? She's going through all this. She actually mentions Koth. Remember I talked about we might see Koth at some point? She actually mentions Koth and New Phyrexia. So we might see all of these characters from the ancient past again. But she realizes that with her Halo Blade, this is something that can be used as a bane against the Phyrexians, and Norn specifically. So at that point, that's when they depart, and their next destination is Dominaria! one of the best planes and the setting of my favorite storylines like the Brothers' War. Now, in terms of the side story, it was literally a side story based around the lounge singer Leonin Kit, and it just talks about how Jetmir found her in a subway as a performer, basically said, I can kickstart your career, but you got to do a job for me, basically. So she's supposed to smuggle a bunch of Halo in for him, and then there's a bunch of trouble. She runs into the Riveters or whatever, trying to get the Halo to him, ultimately gets the Halo to him, and becomes a lounge singer. There's not a ton in that adds to the overall story of New Capenna, but you know what? If you really want all the flavor, you're probably going to enjoy reading it, right? So that wraps up the entirety of the New Capenna story. I am considering doing a complete, basically start to finish story where we go through everything chronologically. So if that's something you'd be interested in hearing after going through this as it unfolds style video, then let me know in the comments. Big thank you to all my patrons for supporting my channel. It does mean a lot. And remember, my friends, lore is life.